Hello, my name is Sean Cannon, and I have been asked to essentially make a presentation on academic planning and preparation. So I will be sharing my screen now, and let's take a look. Right, so we should all be able to see my screen right now. It's a little bit of a presentation. Let me just full screen it, and we can get started. So this is essentially just a basic guide to academic planning and preparation, as how to stay 2 steps of the game. A lot of this presentation is more focused if you're actually in college or if you've been admitted already, but even still, there are a number of notes on, how to actually get in, how to apply, on what particular parts of your resume you should boost. So I hope you enjoy. So a little bit about me. I'm a double major in electrical engineering and computer engineering. I'm currently also pursuing a minor in business administration. I did receive a full ride scholarship to the University of Texas at Dallas. I'm interning at CPI as a compliance engineering intern, and I will be, during the summer, working as a test validation and engineering intern at Texas Instruments. So there are 5 main topics that I wanted to talk about, those being number 1, applying to university. If you're still in 11th grade or so, still trying to figure out where to apply for. 2, scholarships and FAFSA, how much you should be paying, how much you want to be paying, etc. Number 3, defining the goals that you want to achieve while you are in college and how you go about planning that. Number 4, which is early academic planning, how you should structure your degree plan, stuff like that. And then after that, number 5, engaging with faculty, speaking to professors, speaking with academic advisors, how to make normally frustrating bureaucratic interactions a lot easier for you. And then 6, a little bit of a basic roadmap of what your first few years in college might look like. So let's start off with the big 3. These are pretty much what everyone knows when they think about what requirements are asked for applying for college. You have your stats, which is GPA and SAT, extracurriculars, and essays. So first things first, let's start off with standardized testing and GPA. So you may take an SAT, ACT, subject tests, AP tests, IB diploma scores, etc. The thing is, everyone will always stress, never take the SAT too many times, because that also appears as though it's a red flag. If you have between a 1550 through a 1600, any of those scores within that range is interchangeable. If you have a 1580, there's no reason to retake and restudy for the SAT just for that 1600. It's good to have it higher, but also at the same time, if it's above a 1550, there's no real point in stressing out any further. Also a good range is 1500 through 1550. If you get between that score, then you're still pretty much set for most colleges, unless you're shooting for Harvard or HYPSM, Harvard, Yale, Princeton, and I forgot the other 2. But there's no real need to shoot for extremely high SAT scores or extremely high ACT scores, as long as it's high enough. Same thing for GPA. I would put a little bit more emphasis on GPA, where you should be caring more about getting A's or A minuses. But if you focus on your GPA to the exclusion of your extracurriculars or your essay, then you're not really going about it in the best way possible. Your GPA and your SAT, they're what get your foot into the door. They're not your full ride. They're not the things that are going to get you admitted. If those are sort of like the minimum qualifications. I'm speaking about this in regards to if you're going for extremely high level and extremely high difficulty colleges, for example, Duke, or again, Harvard, Yale, or Princeton. If you're still going for a fairly competitive school, you would have a little bit more relaxation. You don't have to get a 1550 to go to like a state school, for example. But it's most like this advice is mostly targeted to if you're trying to go for really high prestige universities. Now, when we go to essays, essays are a lot more wavy with the rules. There aren't exactly any hard and fast specific things to do. Like, for example, it's GPA, get A's, perform as well as possible. With essays, it's a lot more difficult because it's writing and it's a lot more subjective. There are 3 main areas which I can provide some feedback on. Beyond that, I'm not too much of an expert. Formatting. This is a big one because if you don't provide your file in like the right format, sometimes you might have it sometimes they might not be able to review it. They might just treat it as though, oh, you didn't submit it properly, therefore we're going to discard it. We're going to discard it, and that's going to hurt your application really badly. Always double check and triple check for grammar mistakes. It's the basic principle of being a professional and actually showing that you know how to communicate. Run it through Grammarly. That's a great resource. If you have Grammarly that's paid, you can also check to see whether or not there's certain styles, as an insert a semicolon here. Sometimes they'll give you suggestions on how to rephrase certain words. If given a font option, it's always good to default to Times New Roman, size 12. That's pretty much the standard. And also you want to order the essay logically. Intro, body, conclusion is it's standard, but it's standard for a reason. If you want to be a little bit more creative with it, that's fine. Because again, writing and essays are very subjective. Then after that, you want to make sure that you upload it as a PDF. If they want you to upload a file, if they want you to just copy and paste it into a text box, which I'm pretty sure still remains to be the standard, then in that case, don't worry about it. But if you are asked to upload a document, upload a PDF instead of like a Word document. Then after that, style. This is probably, again, one of the more subjective areas, but when your essay is, again, the thing that gets you in. One of my friends got into Stanford for his essay, and his stats weren't even all that great. But he was able to tell a story with his essay. He was able to present who he was in a way that didn't feel generic or overdone, and it was very creative. He engaged the target audience, which is someone who reads these like hundreds of essays on the daily. So that's the thing that you have to remember is you are giving this essay to someone who reads all of these all the time. And I am going to tell you, you have to do something to stick out. But considering that everyone is also trying to do the same thing, it's important that you be genuine and sort of express who you are with this essay. I will say, watch for tone and voice. That's something that not a lot of essays have, and not a lot of high schoolers really have full command over. Active voice, passive voice. The way that you phrase certain things can definitely change that. So you should, I again recommend Grammarly Pro for that. Also, don't use unnecessarily fancy language. If you're trying to communicate something, simple is good. But if you're just trying to put in the most SAT practice words you can, it's just going to be unnecessary, and it's not exactly going to be fun to read. Now, for reviewing essays, I said this, it's a little bit more subjective, so you're always going to get different advice no matter who you talk to, but they are very important. They can make or break applications. So I'd recommend having multiple people review an essay. And if they have any edits, you make a copy of the file, and then you look over their changes or revisions. And then after that, you decide, is this good or not? I'd say get 3-4 people to review it, preferably people who are upperclassmen at the college you're trying to go to, or people who have gotten into college and know what good writing looks like. Draw inspiration from them. If they are willing to lend you their essays, see what they did right, or try and incorporate some stylistic elements that they have chosen into yours. That's a good way of doing this. Again, essays are pretty subjective. Then after that, extracurriculars. I would say that extracurriculars are pretty much the second most important part of your resume, because again, stats get you through the door. Essays and extracurriculars are things that get you in. One thing that I would definitely recommend is you focus on passion versus prestige. If you focus on what you enjoy and what you care about, especially if you're going to a high tier university where sometimes they might interview you and they might ask, what do you like about doing this? What extracurricular really appeals to you? These are people who know what they're doing when they're interviewing you. They're watching what you say, they're watching what you speak, they're asking they're looking at what you respond. And they're going to see if you're just saying, oh, I do this because I love it and because it's my passion. And when in reality, the only thing that you're feeling is just, I don't care about this. I'm doing this for my college essay. And I'm doing this for my resume. They can tell that. They will be able to tell. It's also very important that you focus on long-term commitments versus short-term dabbling. If you do something for 3 years, even if it's not as high spec, it's still going to show that you care a lot more about it than if it's something that you've been doing for 2 months and then dropped. If you wish, you could also elaborate on that particular activity in your essay that might help bring together who you are as a person and why you belong at that college. And leadership is another thing that I feel, of course, whenever you hear college application, you definitely think leadership activities, but it definitely feels as though not a lot of people fully understand leadership as in what people are looking for. Cooperating with other clubs and organizations, involving yourself in the community, and doing it for reasons that is more than just college, because again, you have to have a passion about it. If you really like mechanical engineering, for example, being able to build something or 3D print a tool that you can hand out, that doesn't exactly sound like a leadership activity, but it definitely is, because you're giving back to the community and you're organizing and initiating a process. You're interacting with others and you're making fundamental changes that not many other people had really thought of before you did. And then after that, I'd say the last particular thing about your extracurriculars is make sure that when you're describing what you did, you highlight actual accomplishments. Again, the people who are reviewing your application are people who have reviewed hundreds of applications. They can tell when you're just saying fancy words and when you're basically communicating, oh, I initiated and I voted upon some certain act, when in reality it's just clerical work. If you've actually accomplished something, go into detail about the thing that you accomplished. Go into detail about the work that you actually did. If you're like talking about how you planned and created something when at the end of the day it was more of a pushover than an actual project, and if you try to exaggerate the accomplishments beyond the scope of what it actually was, they're more likely than not going to catch that. They're going to tell, oh yeah, he's just saying something fancy for the sake of sounding fancy, when in reality it wasn't really anything at all. I will now discuss a little bit of a tangent on academics. If you're still in like freshman year or so of high school, you may have the opportunity to take IBs or IB courses or AP courses. If you're looking for college credit, I would recommend APs if you're going for just solely college credit, because a lot of IB credit doesn't exactly extend very far unless you do very well on the exams. APs are universally more accepted. Some colleges may not particularly take IBs, or they may not give as much credit. They provide APs provide credit in most universities. They're pretty easy to take. As long as you take the courses, which give you a GPA boost, and then you take the exam, you're pretty much golden. And they're definitely easier on average than IB courses. You don't need to do as much work for them as you do with IBs. I know because I've taken both. I was an IB student in high school. I did dabble and take a couple of APs, but overall, IB, in my opinion, is more valuable if number one, you want actual life skills, because it does go more into practical applications, and you do see how this actually affected things instead of just what it is. I will say IB is definitely more work, because there were times where I was really, really stressed, had 2 hours or 3 hours of sleep a night. And hold on one second. Oh, IB. IB is essentially International Baccalaureate. It's kind of similar to AP, except I would say APs are more individual classes, whereas IB is a full-on program. I'll type it in the chat so that you can look it up if you'd like. International Baccalaureate. Oh, sorry. Hold on one second. Type that in the wrong chat. Right. And also, you could learn a lot more of the content. So even if you don't get as much, credit for it, you will actually retain more knowledge on average. That I will say again, it is a lot more stressful. There is a lot more that is involved with IB. And if you're looking at just pure applied, you get this many credit hours of college credit for doing this many classes. IB on average is going to give you less, simply because they don't give as much according to US schools. But at the same time, I did learn a lot more from my IB courses than I did some of the AP courses I took, and I enjoyed it more. And it gave me a lot more in the terms of life skills. I can easily handle large amounts of work now without having to deal with much stress. Right, now let's move on to section 2. This is an area where I have, again, a little bit more expertise. I have a full ride scholarship to the University of Texas at Dallas. All my tuition is paid for, and each semester I get roughly $6,000 of money, which I can use for my own needs. For if you're applying to a lot of higher end schools, again, Harvard, Yale, Princeton, etc., you most likely, more often than not, are going to be paying a lot. There's three real tiers of schools, so to speak. There's the super high level prestige schools. There are private schools. Oh, how I score is that question more of a the question is, how did you score good on your PSAT? Is that more like what tools I used, or is that what my score was? Oh, I'll actually get into that in a second. Once I finish this particular slide, because the PSAT is actually something that I view as extremely important. Prestige or price. There's three main tiers of college. Again, super high-end colleges, private schools, and then state schools. State schools will usually not give that much money in terms of scholarships. They'll either give you a need-based scholarship or merit-based scholarship. UTD is a state school, and I believe it's an exception, but I'll get to that in a second. Private schools will give you a decent amount of need-based and a decent amount of merit-based, depending upon what you apply for. And super high-end schools will probably not offer that much in terms of merit-based scholarships, but they will definitely offer a lot of need-based scholarships. Because again, going to those super high-end schools is not cheap. And if you are someone who has a much lower income, then they'll definitely offer you a lot. Because if they still want you there, even if you can't really pay. Now, if you're going for a MD, a PhD, if you're going for a master's degree, if you're going for a graduate school, in that case, I would definitely say look a little bit more towards price, because what really matters is the school that you got your master's from or your higher level degree from. If you are going to be paying for your child's education, or if you as a student are going to be paying for yourself, that is something that you should definitely factor in. My friend who got into Princeton, he ended up going to UTD and took his full ride here, Stanford. And he didn't end up going to Stanford because even though Stanford did want him and they did offer a sizable scholarship, he would be paying upwards of $60,000 a year, even after the aid that they gave him and even after filing a FAFSA. So definitely do focus on what's economical for you, because even if you graduate with a bachelor's in a high-paying field like computer science, if you're graduating with $120,000 worth of student debt, which is pretty realistic for some people, it is very, very hard to pay that back. Now, the PSAT, I recall someone talking about this in the chat. I took a couple of classes. I actually took one of my SATs before I took my PSAT, funnily enough. I think I scored 1460 on my first try on the SAT, and I also scored a 1460 on the PSAT. But the main thing about why the PSAT, I think, is far more undervalued is because if you score high enough on the PSAT, you are assigned a score called a selection index. And if you score above a certain amount, then you are contacted by the National Merit Scholarship Program. That National Merit Scholarship Program is essentially why I have this full ride. Essentially what you do is you score really highly on the PSAT and you score with above a set threshold. Each state has a threshold. For example, like a 1460 would probably get you a selection score of 220. And I used to live in North Carolina, so the threshold in North Carolina was like a 215, and mine was a 220. So I scored above that threshold. I was contacted by National Merit. For different states, for example, like Texas, it would be higher, like 220 or 225. It's been a while since I looked at the specific numbers, but based upon how competitive the selection index is per state, it's definitely going to be harder to get that National Merit Scholarship. What happened was once I scored my PSAT, I got my scores back, and then I also got a letter in the mail from the National Merit Scholarship Program. They messaged me and said, hey, congratulations on making it as a National Merit semifinalist. What happened after that was I submitted my high school transcript. I submitted an essay to them, and I submitted my real SAT score. Once I did that, I waited, I think, a couple months, and I got a return message saying, congratulations, you are now a National Merit finalist. Now, the reason why this is so important is there are certain schools like UTD who give very large amounts of money to National Merit finalists. There's another school, I think, in Alabama, which gives 10 semesters of free tuition and other such bonuses and prizes. Some schools don't really offer that much, maybe like a $3,000 one-time stipend. Other schools don't offer anything at all. For example, a lot of people who go to the higher end schools pretty much get or pretty much don't get much at all, because everyone who goes is a finalist. But if you are careful and if you score really highly, then you can go to college for free. And it is my opinion that being able to go to college without taking on much debt is extremely important. I have been able to do a lot with my time here at UTD that I would absolutely not be able to do if I was paying for it. For example, the only reason I'm able to take my double major and my minor without going over my credit hour allowed limit and being forced to pay out of state tuition for it is because I'm able to go here for free. It affords you a lot more opportunities and you have a lot more relief. Now, as for how I scored well on my PSAT, essentially, I was doing a program at the time that essentially tutored me on what to do for my SAT. I personally didn't find it all that helpful. The first time I took it, the first time I took my SAT, I got a 1460, and I thought, this is decent, but I can do better. After that, I essentially quit the program because I didn't really find it was helping me much. And over, I think, winter break, I locked myself in my room for a week with around 15 to 20 SAT books. I studied by myself and I didn't really come out. And then after that week, I went and I took my test and I got a 1520 on it. So that's essentially what I used for my PSAT. Just a lot of textbooks, just focused a lot and studied well. I can give you some specific textbook recommendations after this presentation is complete. I'm told that my internet connection is unstable. Can you guys still hear me? Is everything fine? Just type it out in the chat and just let me know. All right, okay, great. Now, number 3. This is, at this point in this presentation, I'm going to be talking as though you've already been admitted into the university of your choice, as though you've pretty much figured out where you're going to go, you've got most of your affairs in order. Now, there are certain lessons that I wish I had known within my first couple of years here, which I later learned, and I've been able to implement to massive effect, that I think that you should know before you come in. I think your school actually will give you the PSAT of their own accord. I don't think you intentionally sign up to take the PSAT. Back in my school, we took the ACT in 11th grade and the PSAT in 10th grade. But I will say, again, prepare for that. If you are a resident of Texas, and if you have been a resident of Texas for the past 4 years, I think that it's definitely going to be a lot harder if you are in Texas. I think you'd have to score like a 1500 or above to meet the selection index, because I've met people here at UTD who've gotten like 1480s and like 1490s who still didn't get it. So you'd have to be, and the PSAT is of course easier than the SAT, but you still have to do really well and you still have to know exactly what you're doing in order to get that National Merit Scholarship. But if you get it, then you win pretty much. Now, as for, again, planning, action, and execution, this is pretty much determining where, like, once you've gotten to the place you want to go, what happens next. So the thing is, I also think it's important for parents who are watching this to realize college is absolutely not the same as high school. Because for one, a lot of high schools will pretty much feel obligated to give A's. It's a lot easier of grading than it is. So if your child comes home with like a B on a test or something, or sometimes even a C, the subject matter is definitely a lot harder. and you don't have things like APs. There aren't really extra ways to boost your GPA. So it's important to temper your expectations sometimes, especially if they're going into like a really difficult major, like computer engineering, electrical engineering is very difficult. Computer science is a little bit easier, but there are still a lot of programs that are very difficult to have extremely high GPAs in. If they can do it, and if they're if they have the drive to do it, then in that case, fantastic. But again, I'd say temper your expectations a little bit. But it's important to have a certain idea of what specific goals you want to accomplish within your first year. For example, making new friends. I'd like to place a lot of stress on this. The more friends you have in your major, the more people who you know, the more people who you might be able to ask for help. If there's a difficult project, there's a difficult assignment. It's very important to have, at the very least, a decent social circle. You are the sum of the 10 people who you hang out the most with. So making sure that you have good, knowledgeable friends who have good character is very important. Number 2, setting a decent GPA goal. Number 3, talking with an advisor, creating a degree plan, planning out what your next few years might look like, applying for an honors program. There's a lot of goals that you could have, but it is important that you set them realistically, because unless you're commuting, you are going to be responsible for yourself, especially if you live on campus. But going back to those goals, set plans for each of those goals. How are you going to implement those plans? What are you going to do? You could go to events to meet other freshmen, for example, if you want to make new friends. Studying in advance for classes for a GPA. Oh, is commuting harder than on campus? My national merit money essentially lets me live on campus almost for free. So I've never really felt the need to commute. I will say, when it comes to socialization, yes, it definitely limits your opportunities, because, sometimes you may have friends who are watching a movie later at night and you may not be able to go. Sometimes it does restrict your access to tutoring. For example, if it's like a Friday and you don't really have many classes on Friday, and if there's a tutoring session at 7 p.m. until like 9 p.m., driving all the way to campus, taking classes from like 1 through 4, driving back, and then driving back at 7, it definitely does limit your opportunities. But if you're really caring about price, and if dollars matter, then I would say commute, because it does save money. But personally, I just find it a lot more convenient to live on campus. It also depends a lot on how nice the dorms are at the place that you're going to go. Whether or not you want to share a room with somebody, have roommates, whether you have certain conditions that might make it difficult to live on your own. There's a lot of factors, so it's hard to say specifically, but I would say for me personally, it's a lot more convenient. Now, going back to the goal setting thing. Man makes plans and God laughs. You may not always have your goals blossom into fruition. You might have to deal with some barriers in the way. So it's important to be able to adjust them as you go. If something comes in the way of one of your major programs, in that case, all right, adjust it, try and make a different goal. For example, if you're trying to do really well in your classes, but you have a professor who's really bad, trust me, a lot of them exist, then you might have to, for example, switch it around, maybe drop the course and take it next semester, or you might have to just suffer through it and just study a lot for that one particular class. It is important to be able to adjust your plans on the fly if it happens. Adjust your goals as well. Now, this is also an important thing for any students who are watching this. College is not high school. It is absolutely not high school. It is a lot more difficult in more ways than one. I'm not just talking about the subject matter, but that is one. As a college student, or as a high school student, I remember I had to wake up every single day, 6 a.m., get ready for the bus, go to class every single day nonstop, unless I was sick. And that wasn't just me. That might have been my parents. That might have been my teachers. That might have been the pressure to wake up on time and go to class because it's absolutely required. Not so much in college. I have friends who haven't gone to a single class since the first day. They're doing decent. They're not doing that great. That's why you don't have to go to class. Not a lot of classes have required attendance. There are some, but the vast majority of professors don't really care if you show up. They get paid either way. In high school, you have to show up. In college, you get a lot more personal time. You don't have to spend, okay, let's do a little bit of math here. You might go to high school from 8 a.m. all the way up until 2, maybe 3, maybe 4 p.m. if you have after school activities. That's a solid 8 hours of your time. You're not going to be doing classes for 8 hours every single day, 5 days a week. You have a lot more personal time, but it is important that you manage that personal time effectively. Your professors also don't owe you A's. A lot of teachers in high school sometimes feel the need to give out A's because, they have a lot of overachievers in the class. And if you get an A-, you might get a call from one of their parents asking what's going on. But college professors, they don't care. They'll give you a C. They get paid the same either way. You have to work for yourself and you have to work hard for yourself. You are here because you want to be. You are paying to be here. It's either you're paying for it or your parents paying for it. You have to be responsible for yourself. The prioritization of knowing what to do, when to do it, being able to discipline yourself to get up for your 8 a.m. class, even if you just want to sleep in, that's crucial to have. There was a class that I really did not pay attention to all that much. And even though I ended up getting an A- in the class, it was far more difficult for me than it was for a lot of other people because they went to class, they showed up, and they paid attention. I managed to struggle my way to get to an A-, but it would have been a lot easier if I had put in that effort to go to class. I did not make that mistake ever since that one time. Next, cheating, academic dishonesty, and collusion. What happens with bad weather for college? You might have to elaborate on that. I'm not sure I fully understand your question, but going back to it. Parents, you may not know, or you may know. Students, you definitely know. There are people who cheat, whether it's on tests, whether it's pulling their phone out for a project, whether it's copying. I've been a high school student. I am a college student. I know just how much cheating and academic dishonesty goes because let's be honest, we want the highest grades possible. We want the best opportunities for ourselves. And sometimes we might cheat just to get that little boost. In college, it does nothing but hurt you because when you're cheating or when you're lying or when you're colluding with someone else, you're going to end up feeling the effects of that yourself because the things that you study in college are things that you'll be using later in your career. If you cheat on a coding assignment, for example, congratulations, you may get an A. You may be able to pass the course if you cheat hard enough, but then after that, you're going to be applying for a developer role or you're going to be applying for an internship. They're going to ask you to write a line of code. You're going to stand there like an idiot, not knowing what's going on because you cheated. This stuff isn't like cheating on a history assignment in high school that's never going to get brought up again. This is stuff that you actually need to know. That's why I highly recommend not cheating. Just don't do it. Because even if it's, you get a grade, the only reason, you're not learning anything from it and you go to college to learn. It's a waste of money. You're paying money to cheat. Doesn't help. But again, you have to be disciplined. You have to know what's going on and you have to be able to push yourself to success. Next, planning your academic future. This is a lot more difficult than you may think at first. Also, did you ever respond or try and clarify your question about bad weather? I'll try and respond to that when I can. Right. The thing is, a lot of high school students just look at the college they want to go to. They see the degree that they want to go to. And then after that, they apply. And then once they get in, they stop caring. That is, I think, one of the single biggest flaws that you can do to yourself. For example, if you're applying to Carnegie Mellon because you hear it's good for engineering, you apply to Carnegie Mellon and then you get in. Great. Now you stop caring about it because you're already in, right? Wrong. Different colleges have different policies, even if it's the same degree. North Carolina, NC State University, which is a place that I was going to go to until I got my full ride. Oh, if students get released early, if a storm happens like high school. Yeah. So the thing is, right now at UTD, there is a tornado warning. We had classes canceled after 5 o'clock. So ironically enough, one of my midterms was postponed. If the weather is bad enough, they will cancel school. and you'll just get to sit at home for that day. If it's just like raining or something, you walk through it. They don't really evacuate campus or anything along those lines. Classes usually aren't virtual. If there's like a school-wide delay, for example, we had snow a month and a half ago. We had, I think, 4 to 5 days of college canceled, and one day we had a delay, and the professor chose that even though he could hold his class in person, he chose to have it online. So whether or not the specific course modality, virtual or in person, that is usually dependent on the teacher. But if the weather is bad enough, then in that case, they'll pretty much just cancel school. So yeah. Now going back to this, researching the degree at the school. Different schools have different implementations, even if it might be the same degree. Computer engineering at UTD versus computer engineering at UT versus computer engineering at Carnegie Mellon. Different schools have different approval requirements. If you're trying to transfer in credit from IB, if you're trying to transfer credit from AP, if it's from dual credit, college credit, there's very, very different implementations of the same thing. For example, if you're going to try and be a or if you're trying to go pre-med, you have to take certain bio courses. But even if you have those high school credits, sometimes they might ask you, hey, you have to take it here before you can actually get into the pre-med track, or if you want to stay on the pre-med track. So important courses, they might need to be booked as soon as possible. There is a class at UTD for computer science and computer engineering majors called a discrete math, CS 2305. The selection of professors is varied in quality. And it's also varied in time. Might be a specific time slot that is exactly at 12:30 that might work perfectly for you. But if you don't know about that time slot, or if you haven't done research into the specific courses they need to take, you might end up putting yourself in a really unfavorable situation when it comes to like a schedule. And even then, again, special classes for pre-med, pre-law, or graduation school tracks. You might need to fill out certain forms if you're trying to graduate early, if you're doing research, if you're trying to go for a double major, trying to go for a minor, you might have degree audits. It's very important to look at what specific requirements or what special rules your college may have. There are a lot of schools in Texas that have like degree plan flowcharts. You see what courses you need to take, what order you need to take them. Those are some of the most important files that I think you could have. Also, please make sure that you meet with an academic advisor as soon as possible once you get into high school or once you get into college. A good advisor can work wonders for you. I have worked very closely with both of my advisors for engineering, and they have been amazing for allowing me to get to where I am with things like my double major, things like taking extra courses or dropping extra courses, things like that. Now, another thing that you absolutely should use is Rate My Professor. It's essentially an online tool where you search the name of a professor that you need to take, and it essentially pops up a review. I won't exactly release very specific names, but if you just look online, ratemyprofessor.com, you'll be able to find information on those specific professors, and you'll be able to see what actual students thought of them. For example, a 1.3, avoid a professor like that at all costs. Even if you have the answers to all their work, even if an upperclassman gives you all their answers, do not take it. If you get someone with like a 4.5 or anybody above a 4, absolutely prioritize taking those professors above all, because they know what they're talking about. They are pretty empathetic when it comes to making sure students are happy, and you will actually enjoy the class. If you take the one on the left, this 1.3 over here, that class is going to be nothing but hell for you. If you take this one, it's going to be a breeze. You still are going to work for it. You're still going to have to actually put in the effort to learn, but it's going to be far more easy for you than it is if you take this one. And this is something that you have to plan for before you go for your next semester. If you start trying to figure out what courses you need to take, the day that registration happens, all the good classes are going to be taken by people who did their research beforehand. Now, begin the process. If you are admitted to a university, let's say the University of like UT, University of Texas at Austin, and if you had a specific major, and if you got in for that specific major, look it up. University of Texas at Austin neuroscience. There should be a list of classes that you need to take. There should be a flow chart. What classes you need to take in what order. Read that, because that is very important. That will tell you how long it will take for you to graduate. That'll tell you what courses you need to take and what professors teach those courses. And then you can research those professors on Rate My Professor. And then you can decide, okay, I'm going to take this professor for this class. And you can do that well in advance. So the day that registration opens, you know what to do. I also will say, be realistic about your goals and expectations. You're not going to graduate in 2 years with a CS degree. You're not going to graduate med school in 5 years. It's just not going to happen. Or 5 years for undergraduate and graduate school. Be realistic about what you can do and what your priorities are. If you want to graduate as early as possible and get out of college and go do a job, then in that case, good on you. But make sure that you have assessed your decisions. A good thing to do is discussing with friends. Talk with them if they're in the same major, what their options are, what they're planning to do, whether or not they're going to take it easy or whether or not they're going to go for it as quickly as possible. Find out what the most important classes are. I mentioned about a class earlier, discrete math. That is one of the fundamental core courses that you need as a computer science student. And therefore, it is very important that you know what you're doing. Talk with upperclassmen, people who have taken this course, or people who have taken your degree before, people who have taken those classes before are extremely valuable. Figure out a balance of easy and hard classes. If you take 6 extraordinarily difficult classes, you are going to spend every waking minute stressed out. I know, because that's what I'm currently doing. Now, also know the prerequisites and co-requisites of certain courses, because you're not going to be able to take like an advanced neuroscience class without having a fundamental understanding of neuroscience. You might have to take certain courses in order to get to the higher level topics. And that might also limit your degree plan and your movement forward, because if you spend a lot of time on doing your gen ed requirements, like your history, your math, and you spend a lot of time on courses that you could take whenever versus fundamental classes, you might be limited by the classes that you can take later on because you haven't taken those core fundamentals. So it is definitely important to know the prerequisites and co-requisites of certain classes. I'll also consult your advisor. I'll get into advising later, but that's one of the most important things that you can do as a college student. It's made my life a lot easier. Now, if once you've gotten settled, you could take classes at a community college with an eye towards early graduation if you want to transfer things in. I mentioned general education or gen ed classes before. There are certain classes that I need to take even as an electrical engineer and a computer engineering major. I have to take 3 hours of art or art history. I have to take 3 hours or I think 3 hours of economics, 6 hours of history. So I have to take rhetoric, for example. I have to take government I have to take Texas government and federal government. That's Texas law. You have to take those classes as a college student. But the thing that you can do is you can take them at easier places. A lot of community colleges offer those core courses, and a lot of the times they're far easier than they would be at actual full-on universities. And because of that, you could take those classes early. You can get them out of the way. That's like 24 to like 40 credit hours, like 10 classes tops that you could just transfer in. And it's cheaper, it's easier, and it's definitely more effective if they're general education, because that's not exactly something like if you're going for neuroscience, I don't exactly think it's too important for you to be able to understand the subtleties of art history, which is actually a course that I had to take. I will say though, understand that does come with a drawback, because those courses are easier than something like neuroscience or engineering. Because it's easier, you could get a higher grade on it if you took it at the university. And therefore, that could raise your GPA. If you're taking 4 classes that are extremely hard, you might sometimes want to take another 2 courses that are easier. So if you got a B or a C on one of them, which does happen, then you can counterbalance that with an A in both of those easier classes. So do keep an eye on that if you so choose. If you're very confident that you can just do all the hard courses and you don't need anything easy, yeah, go for it. If you're concerned that much about early graduation. And keep an eye on any future goals you may have. Say, for example, you want to do research. Keep an eye on your email, for example. There's a lot of opportunities, even in high school, that people miss all the time simply because they're not paying attention. Maybe they might be offering a special thing for high school students who could do research at the undergraduate level. Yes. So taking those courses at a community college, one thing that I did, which I'm not exactly sure I'd fully recommend for most people because it's a lot of work, is I took courses at a community college and while at UTD at the same time. I also took those community college courses during the summer, and I plan on taking it during this upcoming summer while I'm working my internship. You can take those courses at the same time. The thing is, there is a certain course limit that your school will place on you. The average student workload is roughly between 14 and 16 credit hours. The average is usually 15. What that means is you spend 15 hours a week in class, and then you spend 15 times 2, 30 hours a week studying for those courses outside of class. That's essentially what 15 credit hours means. It's like 40 hours a week of work. I took 26 during my spring of 2022. Last semester I took 20. This semester I'm taking 21. I've essentially just had a track record of taking very large amounts of courses because I'm doing my double major and my minor, it requires a lot more work. So don't overload yourself. If you're taking 30 credit hours and you fail 10 of them, then there's no real reason to doing that. You take those courses and you make sure that you actually get good grades in them. For community colleges, you can get a C and it doesn't matter because it doesn't affect your actual GPA at the university that you're going to. But if you're doing really badly in your courses at your main school and you're not even going to get credit for those, then you have your priorities all wrong. I was able to take 26 credit hours, and I will say my grade did dip slightly, but I still did very well, and I was able to get credit for all those courses at the community college and all the courses that I was taking at the moment. But yeah, keep an eye when classes are offered. Make sure that you take a look at all the different opportunities that you can have. Some schools may offer special certificates, different certifications, different honors programs may offer different opportunities. Make sure that you actually look into all these different things that you have. Show initiative. I also would say plan your classes the best you can. Talk to different people about their courses that they're taking, about whether or not this course is easy, whether or not that course is hard, whether this professor is fine, that professor is bad. Talk to them about it because it will make a very large difference. Preparation is the first step into success. Also, advisors in honors programs. Advisors are extremely important. I am on first name basis with my advisor. I used to be a teacher assistant for her in a couple of the classes that she had to teach. And she helped me a lot when it came to planning my degree plan. She helped me when it comes to just providing overrides. For example, the limit of the courses that you can take at UTD is 18 without advisor approval. I just text her. I have her phone number. I just text her, hey, I'm trying to apply for this extra course. It's not letting me. Can you add me in? She says, sure, adds me in. If you're a regular student who doesn't know your advisor, who doesn't particularly like them, that process could take up to a week. And at that point, the class is already filled. Be on good terms with your advisor. It's one of those minor things that doesn't seem all that important, but it absolutely is. They would complete your degree audits. If once you make a certain amount of progress in your degree, you might have block on your account blocking you from registering for other courses, and you can't stop that. How many honors classes are there? That depends. Like different schools have different honors programs. UT has different school or different procedures than UTD. It varies based on the college. But if you want to apply for them, go for it. A lot of them offer special perks. You can register for certain classes earlier than other people. You may get a certain thing on your resume saying, I'm a member of honors program from X college. The benefit for being in honors, I will be honest, I am currently in the honors program for UTD. There is not really all that much in the way of actual resume boosting and hard stat boosting. but it does offer me certain advantages in that I can register for classes before a lot of other people can. I get first pick. My school, UTD, they offer free tickets to like operas and plays and stuff like that, like frontline seats that are usually worth hundreds of dollars. They hand them out once per month to the honor students. Honor students also get access to like, it's essentially the smaller perks. You might get free printing. You might get this or that. And it's not exactly something that you should, or it's not exactly something that might offer straight up like bonuses and make you shine more. But it is something that it's the smaller things that do help sometimes. I think the biggest bonus for me personally is being able to register earlier. If you're in, I suppose, like some dean's list or really high positions that aren't full honors programs, you might have a little bit more success there. And that might be a little bit more of a resume booster. But for regular honors programs, depending on the program, it's a lot more about the smaller perks that make your life easier. And making your life easier is never a bad thing. But yes, advisors are pretty much some of the most important faculty that you can be friends with. I will say, when it comes to goals, it's usually preferable to have a higher GPA than being able to graduate on time. If you have like a 3.8 and you graduate in 4 years, I would say that that's better than a 3.3 within 3.5 years. But if you have some financial hardship and you need to graduate as quickly as possible, or if your GPA is already like a 3.7 or something, and you know that it's not going to matter much if you just skip out on a semester, that's completely fine. Also, if you do want to go for higher education, if you're going to go pre-med, if you're going to go for a master's in a certain topic, then it would be good to also know graduate advisors. I haven't spoken with any graduate advisors because I'm not fully sure if I'm going to go that route as of now. But at the same time, if that is something that you have in mind, it's good to reach out. Now, number 5, engaging with advisors and professors. Forming a personal connection with faculty is one of the absolute best things that you can do for yourself. And I am not saying that lightly. So the thing is, hold on. Professors, especially if they're research professors or if they're professors emeritus or if they're the heads of departments, making sure that you're a good student in those classes, making sure that you reach out, show initiative even after classes end, that will go leaps and bounds in making your life easier. I'll get into that in a bit. Now, here are some basic rules on how to actually form decent faculty relationships. And honestly, a lot of it is as simple as just being a good person. Well, first impressions last a lifetime. If you're meeting a professor for the first time, go to class. Sit in the front of the class. Let's be honest. I know a lot of students. They just go and sit in the back and they play video games the whole class and then they leave not knowing anything. And the professors know that. They see that. They see who's attentive. They see who's actually paying attention. And that matters because maybe you're feeling really sick and you don't want to take an exam on a certain day. You email them and you say, hey, can I please take this a day later? If they know that you care, if they know that you're in class, if they know that you treat it as though it matters, they're going to be a lot more willing to help you out than if you sit in the back and play video games the whole time. But yes, when you're sending emails to them, when you're speaking to them, be friendly, but not overly familiar. Keep in mind, you are the student and they are the professor. Be to the point, but not abrupt, because professors, especially advisors, they will get hundreds of emails and they don't exactly have the time to read a full-on essay. Don't be rude, don't be insulting. Again, follow basic social procedures. If you meet with an advisor, wrap up with an email afterwards summarizing your appointment, saying thank you, etc. Don't slack around in class. Also, usually classes aren't exactly the longest. For example, a 3 credit hour course, you'll probably be going to that course 2 or 3 times a week. And that usually lasts for an hour or an hour and 15 minutes. That's not always a lot of time to learn. If you don't fully know what you're doing, don't sit around in your house and just do nothing or watch YouTube. Go to office hours for help. Professors have a time allotted each week where they essentially have open consultation. You can walk into their office. You can ask, hey, I need some help with this. They'll explain it to you. they'll help you out. And if you show up, that already sets you apart from most people who don't take advantage of that opportunity. Next after that, proper email etiquette. I have received so many complaints from my advisors about people who do not email properly. They have really bad grammar. They're really rude. They're not formal. They don't give all the information that they need. They're not to the point. It's very important that you use proper email etiquette. Even if your professor doesn't use proper email etiquette, you still should. Your language should be formal and clear. If you have a reason that you're emailing them, that should be in the subject line: name, reason, class number, student ID, intention. Be to the point, polite, and make your end goal and intentions clear from the start. Don't make your professor read 3 paragraphs just to understand what you're trying to tell them. Email etiquette is more understated but it is more important than you think. Now, staying ahead of the queue. You're not the only person in college who's trying to do the best they can. You're not the only person trying to get ahead. Most academic advising departments are overworked and understaffed. My first name connection with 2 advisors is pretty much a rarity, and it's probably one of the best tools that I have in my arsenal, because if I really need something done ASAP, I can have that issue resolved in under an hour. For a lot of students, it might be 3 or 4 days, and those tiny differences add up a lot. This isn't exactly things that are going to boost your resume, knowing an advisor, but it's going to let you take a certain class that you normally wouldn't be. It'll let you get away with not doing an audit and being forced into a class anyway. It'll be the difference between you dropping a class on time or you dropping a class late and still having to pay partial amounts for it. Be ahead of the curve with your emails, audits, and planning. If there's something coming up in a month, email your advisor about it now instead of the day of, when everybody's emailing their advisors about it. Go to meetings in person rather than online. This is for both professors and for advisors, because if you go in person, you're going to actually leave an impression on them. An email is a collection of letters and perhaps numbers and is completely interchangeable. You are a faceless drone when it comes to emails. When you're in person, they know you and they remember you. They get hundreds of emails a day. Make sure you differentiate yourself from them. Right, now this should be the second to last slide. This is a little bit of a roadmap of undergraduate goals. Not my goals per se, but just kind of what things will be like for a standard college student who's trying to achieve high goals for the first couple of years. Freshman year, I'm going to give you advice that's both simultaneously contradictory, but you should do it. The courses that you take freshman year are going to be the easiest that they will ever be. That's why you should get as high of grades as you can in those courses, because those courses are the things that'll make your GPA, they'll boost your GPA. So down the line in 3 years, when you're taking really, really tough courses, you're not getting your GPA brought down by the C that you got in the easy course freshman year. I had a friend, she got a D in a course that was literally supposed to give you a free A, and it made life a lot more complicated for her down the line. And the advice that I'm going to give you, which is also contradictory to get super high grades, is also do as much socializing as you can. Making sure that you have a stable and good friend group is important, because those are the people who you'll be talking with. Those are the people who might be taking the same classes as you. Those are the people who might be able to help you out if you're having difficulty with a certain something. That is extremely important, because by the time you're in junior year or senior year, friend groups have already formed. People have a certain circle that they walk in. In freshman year, everything is new. You don't really know anybody. Nobody really knows you. And if you don't really lay the mold in that quickly, if you don't have a set group that you interact with, then in that case, you're pretty much setting yourself up to fail, because you don't have people who you can ask for help. Next, have a degree plan charted out. I mentioned how there might be a list of courses that you need to take for a specific major. So start planning where and when you take certain courses. Learn to take care of yourself and build discipline. This is, again, a very important thing as students that you should have, because you are now in college. You are here because you want to be. act like that. You might be able to find in research internships, depending on your major. You may be able to get them early. Depending on your major, you may not be able to. Someone like a computer science student could get an internship. If they really were good at what they did, they could get one freshman year itself. They'd have to be amazing at it, but they really could be. You could, someone who's like a med student, there's not really much chance if you're in freshman year. If you're computer engineering or electrical engineering, you're probably going to be able to get one junior year, maybe if you're really lucky, sophomore year. But depending upon your major, depending upon what your intentions are, you might be able to do something. My family friend's daughter is graduating the semester early as I go with recession. It depends on several aspects. I mean, number one, what's their income level? Number two, how does that affect their GPA? Number three, there's a lot of factors that sort of play into whether or not. I mean, normally you'd say, yes, it's good graduating the semester early because, of course, you want to pay less money, but it depends on several factors. I'll go into that after this. But yeah, freshman year is more getting used to things because there is a radical shift between high school and college. And getting used to that shift is kind of why freshman year is a lot easier. Now, sophomore year happens. And for parents, and this is one thing that I'd like to point out, a lot of students undergo what's called a sophomore slump, which is essentially their grades dip, courses get harder, they start to get demoralized, they start to not really like college all that much. Sometimes there might be problems with certain courses. You might end up getting like really low grades in a certain class. You might have to retake a class. So sophomore year is definitely harder, and that shift can screw some people over because they're so used to college being easy that first year that they'll underestimate what it is like sophomore year, and then they'll get a 50 on a test and they'll realize, oh crap. So that is something that you should watch out for sophomore year. And this is a lot of the time where you spend time developing skills because you have a lot more free time. You should start using it to make yourself better, whether it's creating technical projects, whether it's trying to volunteer at certain places, whether you're trying to actually focus on developing certain skills. If you're learning a language as a computer science student, sophomore year is usually a time where it's good for, at the very least, starting those goals. And if, depending upon your major, again, you can begin applying for basic internships or research, perhaps. Those are opportunities that you can get. There's multiple different things you can do. You can join clubs, you can do extracurriculars. That way you form connections. There's a lot that you can do freshman and sophomore year. I'm currently in junior year, and next year I'll be in senior year. So I can speak with great experience on these two upcoming topics. Junior year is the time where there's not really many weed out courses. At this point, you've pretty much passed most of the difficult, baseline courses. For example, physics and lower level, coding or engineering classes. After you've passed those, these courses will be the most important courses for your career. I took a couple classes last semester that I didn't think was, yes, that's what I mean by retake a class, because sometimes you need a C plus to graduate a class, or a C minus. And if you got a D or a D minus or an F, which happens pretty often depending upon your degree. Okay, I wouldn't say it happens pretty often. There's not exactly a lot of people I know running around with 7 Fs, but there are people who sometimes have to retake a class. And yes, you do have to pay again for it. But yeah, sorry. These courses that you take in junior year and senior year especially will be courses that have information that you'll actually use. For my interview at Texas Instruments, they were talking about skills that I learned from a class I had dismissed earlier before because I didn't think it was that important. I still knew the knowledge, but I didn't treat it with as much seriousness. And then they started talking about the topics I learned in that class. And I realized, oh, it's a good thing I actually knew this material. Otherwise, I would be screwed. I wouldn't know how to answer. So I would also say final decisions should be made if you've decided to go to grad school, if you decide to go for a double major. If you want a double major, I would actually assign that to beginning of junior year. it should be something that you've thought about during sophomore year, but you decide to do a double major beginning of junior year, hopefully. Your GPA should hopefully be above a 3.0, a beat average. That's pretty good if you're going into engineering. If you're going to med school, if you're going to like dentistry, if you're going into some kind of grad school, it needs to be much higher. As an engineering student, it doesn't particularly matter what your GPA is above a certain point. It's good to have it higher. And if you don't have experience in a class, or if you don't have work experience, if you don't have internship experience, then in that case, GPA is going to matter much more. When you have internship experience, when you have some work experience under your belt, GPA matters less. So someone with a 3.7 GPA who has no work experience and no projects is probably not going to be picked over someone with a 3.2 GPA who has internship experience. So that's how that works for engineering. However, if you're going into graduate school, if you're going to try and get a master's, if you're going to go into pre-med, your GPA needs to be extremely high. Your GPA should probably be like a 3.7 or a 3.8 if you're trying to go into a good med school. Grad school for different majors, it could be a bit less, but it's good for your GPA to be as high as possible. For engineering specifically, a minimum of like a 3.0 is good. If you're in junior year and if you're going into engineering, you should have an internship by summer. Because if you don't have an internship, then you're going to graduate with a degree and no job experience at all. So how are you going to get a job without any experience? It's going to be a lot more difficult. And if you do well at your internship during junior year summer, they will most likely give you a return offer. Come work for us full time. And then you'll actually have a job without having to do extraordinary amounts of work for it. And by junior year, you should have developed as an adult. You're 20, 21 now. You've made your mistakes the first 2 years of college. You should be a well-adjusted adult, a useful member of society. Finally, you have senior year. This is where you take most of like the super high level difficult classes. This is where sometimes you start applying for grad schools and med schools. And it's good to have at least one good internship. 2 internships is good, but depending on your major, that might not be possible for you. GPA is no longer that much of a priority if you've got like a return offer, but a lot of those return offers are contingent on you still doing long courses. So if you get a return offer from like Amazon or something because you got an Amazon internship, and then you say, "Oh, I'm into Amazon, no worry," and you fail 3 courses, they're probably going to rescind their offer because you didn't do well. So it's important to focus on skill development, on making sure that you know what you're doing, on doing research into subjects that you probably might not have had time for in your earlier years, or now you have the skills and now you have the knowledge to actually start pursuing other things. For example, there are certain technical certifications that you can get that are pretty important for engineering students. And even if you weren't able to take those freshman year or sophomore year because you didn't have the knowledge, now that you've taken all those courses and now that you know what you're doing, you can go start applying and taking some certifications. And that skill development that might not exactly boost your GPA, but it's something that's good for a resume and might get you hired. Once you graduate senior year, most people, they might either take a gap year or they might go straight into the job market. But my experience doesn't extend this far. I don't fully know too much what happens after graduation because I'm still a junior year student. But yeah, that's all. Thank you so much for being great listeners, and feel free to ask any questions that I could answer for you.
You did a great job.
Great. Thank you very
Thank
much.
you.
All right. Good Ivy Leagues. I mean, that's kind of an oxymoron. They're all good. That's the thing. I would say don't focus on Ivy League as an Ivy League specifically, because Ivy Leagues are just 8 private research universities. Like there's Princeton, Harvard, Yale, Brown, Dartmouth, or UPenn. Yeah, sure. they're all just Ivy Leagues, but the name Ivy League, if you compare a university like Duke University, they're in North Carolina. They're not a member of Ivy League, but they're pretty much equivalent when it comes to tier for tier prestige. I would also say the quality of the education is definitely going to be increased if you go to like an Ivy League or like a super high-end university. However, the most advantage that you'll get isn't going to really be coming from the quality of the courses. It's going to be coming from the people who you know. People who go to Harvard end up as senators. They end up as people who are making $500,000 a year as brain surgeons. You will have a lot higher end of connections if you go someplace there. It still does depend, but at the same time, know what you're paying for when it comes to Ivy League. If you're trying to go to an Ivy League student, or if you're trying to go to an Ivy League to impress all your friends, or to tell the other Indian parents that your child goes to an Ivy League, and if that's all that you're really getting out of it, then in that case, you're pretty much throwing money away. Yeah, sure. That's pretty much my take on Ivy Leagues. The greatest help that you'll get is from there. Any other questions? All right, I think I'll close it out with that. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Shashank. Thank you so much.
All right.